My name is Mary T. Murrah. The moment my mother told me to skip my daughter's birthday, something in me went quiet in a way that never came back. She said it casually, like she was suggesting we reschedule a dentist appointment, not erase a child's day. Your kid's birthday will make your sister's boys feel left out, she said. Just skip it. Be mature about it. My daughter had just turned 9. She wasn't a baby anymore, but she was still young enough to believe birthdays mattered. Still young enough to count candles and ask about cake flavors weeks in advance. I had asked my mom if we could do something small, just at the house, nothing fancy. A cake, a few balloons, maybe a movie night. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking for attention. I was asking for permission, and that should have been my first mistake. We'd been living in my parents' house for almost 2 years by then. After my ex-husband left and started a new family in another state, I didn't have many options. My mom told me we could stay until I got back on my feet. But what she really meant was that we could exist quietly as long as we didn't take up space. They helped with childcare sometimes, sure, but kindness came with conditions. My daughter was watched constantly, corrected constantly. Comments about her body, her clothes, her laugh. My father once joked that she should cut carbs before she started looking like a fridge. My mother laughed. I heard it from the kitchen. My daughter heard it from the stairs. The next night, she asked for a smaller plate at dinner. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pack our things and leave right then, but fear makes you practical instead of brave. I was trying to work, to survive, to raise a kid on my own. Stability, even poison stability, feels safer than free fall when you're exhausted. The only person who acted like my daughter mattered that day was my uncle. He came by quietly and slipped an envelope into my hand. $300. No card, no speech. He kissed my daughter on the forehead and left without staying. I think he was ashamed of what he saw and didn't know how to fix it. That night, my daughter asked why Nana didn't give her a birthday present. I told her maybe they forgot. She didn't push. She just lay in bed, humming softly to herself like she was trying to make it hurt less. I went downstairs to do laundry and found my parents laughing with my sister's kids over the new gaming consoles they'd gotten the week before. Wrapping paper still on the floor. One of the cards read, "To my favorite boys," my mom's handwriting. I didn't argue. I didn't confront them. I went upstairs, packed what we needed, and sat beside my daughter until morning. When she woke up, I told her we were going on an adventure. Somewhere better. We left without saying goodbye. We moved to Columbus with what fit in the back of my car and a kind of quiet hope I didn't trust yet. The apartment was small, just outside the city, the kind of place where you can hear your neighbors sneeze through the walls and the heat takes a few minutes to kick in. But it was ours. No comments about plates, no jokes about bodies, no whispers from the stairs. The first night, my daughter slept straight through without waking up to check if someone was mad at her. That alone felt like progress. I kept my old job at first, working remotely and pretending the knot in my chest was just part of change. A few months later, I found a better one. Better pay, better hours, a manager who didn't talk over me. The difference showed up in small ways. Groceries without math, shoes that fit her feet instead of growing room. We started building routines that belonged to us. Pancakes on Saturdays, stickers on the fridge when she finished a book, gymnastics twice a week because she asked, not because I thought it would make her smaller. She started laughing again, the full body kind that makes you forget to breathe. I hadn't realized how much she'd been holding herself in until she didn't have to anymore. I taught her how to crack eggs without getting shells everywhere. She taught me how to braid hair, the way the girls at school did it. Some nights we sat on the couch with our legs tangled, watching shows we'd already seen because familiarity felt safe. I started planning her 10th birthday quietly, the way you plan something fragile, not to prove anything, not to get back at anyone. I wanted one day where she didn't feel like an afterthought. I wanted her to feel centered, seen. I circled the date on a calendar the week we moved, back when everything still felt uncertain, and I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone ruin it. As the months passed, I thought less about my parents and more about the life we were actually living. My sister texted occasionally, polite things, updates about her kids. She never mentioned the birthday we'd skipped. I didn't either. Some wounds don't need reopening to heal. When I finally started booking things for the party, I felt ridiculous and determined at the same time. A lakeside venue just outside the city, string lights, space for games, a bounce house shaped like a castle. Inside, tables for crafts, a cupcake bar, music, and a woman dressed as the cartoon heroine my daughter still loved, even though she pretended she didn't. I spent more than I should have. I didn't care. Money comes back. Childhood doesn't. I invited neighbors, her classmates, a few families from gymnastics, and my sister. That was it. No mom, no dad. Not after last year. Not after being told my kid's birthday was an inconvenience. My sister texted the week before to say she was bringing her boys. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Her kids could be decent when she was watching them, but when she wasn't, they repeated everything they heard. Things that made my daughter go quiet when she thought I wasn't listening. I almost said no. Then I thought maybe seeing her happy would do something. Shame, jealousy, anything better than indifference. The morning of the party, my daughter put on the pale blue dress with silver stars across the sleeves. When she twirled, it lit up under the sun, and she laughed like she'd forgotten how heavy things used to feel. Her friends arrived in clumps, dragging her from station to station, losing shoes, frosting on chins, music too loud. Her face hurt from smiling. I watched from the deck and felt something loosen in my chest. For the first hour, nothing went wrong. It felt like the world had finally decided to be kind. Then her cousins arrived. They didn't say happy birthday. They went straight for the snack table, piled food on their plates, started throwing it at each other like it was a backyard cookout. One pulled down a streamer and popped a balloon. Another knocked over a centerpiece my daughter and I had made together the night before. Paper flowers spilled across the floor. She saw it happen. I saw her shoulders drop before she turned away. She walked down to the edge of the lake and stood there staring at the water. I followed, ready to fix it, to say something brave and loud. Before I could reach her, I heard it behind me, said with the confidence kids use when they're repeating something they believe is true. Why does she even get a party? Nana says she's not really part of our family anyway. The air froze. Adults stopped mid-sentence. A few kids looked around like they knew something had just broken. I turned, heart pounding, ready to confront whoever said it. My sister was already there. Her face had gone white. She grabbed both boys by the arms, apologized once, and left. No excuses, no lingering. Didn't even wait for cake. The party never quite recovered. Parents tried, kids tried. My daughter came back and smiled for pictures, but her eyes looked tired. Later that night, we sat on the couch, scrolling through photos. She picked her favorites, all from before her cousins arrived, and asked if we could send them to Grandma. I said sure. I sent the whole folder, no message, just the photos. One in particular. Her surrounded by kids laughing, frosting on her chin, a sparkler candle in her hand, glowing. Her cousins weren't in that shot. Neither were my parents. They saw it. I know they did. 2 days later, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over a year. My uncle, my dad's older brother. The one who never played favorites, the one who remembered birthdays without reminders, the one who used to slip me extra gifts when my mother decided my sister deserved more. He didn't waste time on small talk. He said he'd seen the photos. He said he'd heard what the boys said. Then he said, "I'm coming to get you. It's time your parents are reminded who they used to be." He pulled up Thursday afternoon in a dark blue truck. I hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years. Not since a wedding where my parents spent the night whispering about how embarrassing I looked in a thrifted dress. He stepped out, holding a folder in one hand and a small bag of cookies in the other. Chocolate chip, homemade. He said they were for my daughter. Then he nodded toward my car like this was already decided. I told my daughter I'd be back soon. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me and went back to coloring, trusting me in a way that made my chest ache. We drove toward the house I hadn't stepped foot in since the night we left. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. The living room looked exactly the same. Same couch, same coffee table, same stale feeling. What stopped me cold was the photo sitting right in the middle of it, printed, framed. The picture from the party, the one with my daughter smiling under the sparkler candle. My mother was in the kitchen making coffee like this was a normal visit. My father sat in his recliner, watching TV with the volume too loud. He didn't turn around, but I could tell he knew I was there. My uncle didn't sit. He stayed standing. He looked at them and said, "You've gone too far." My mother opened her mouth to respond, but he cut her off. "I saw the photos. I heard what those boys said. I talked to people who were there. What happened to you two?" My mother waved it off, said I was dramatic, said kids say things, said the party wasn't that big of a deal. My father muttered something about me always wanting attention. That's when my uncle opened the folder. Inside were old family photos, Me as a kid, smiling next to lopsided birthday cakes. My sister and me in matching outfits. A handwritten note my father wrote when I was sick in middle school, calling me his brave little trooper. He held them up one by one. You remember this girl, he asked? You used to love her like she mattered. Now you treat her like she's lucky to be tolerated, and you're doing the same thing to her kid. My mother snapped that I made my own choices, that I married the wrong man, that I was playing the victim now. My uncle didn't raise his voice. He just looked around the room, then at the couch where I used to cry myself to sleep some nights, and shook his head. I gave you that truck outside so you wouldn't feel trapped in this house, he said. You want to treat your own child like garbage? Then walk. Maybe fresh air will knock some decency back into you. He took the keys off the hook by the door and put them in his pocket. Then he turned and left. I followed without saying a word. They watched us go, stunned, not guilty, just shocked. Someone finally said what they didn't expect to hear. We got back to my place around 4. My daughter was at the kitchen table drawing. When she saw me, she smiled and ran over. She asked if we were going to see Grandma and Grandpa again soon. I knelt down and told her maybe, but not until they remembered how to be kind. A week later, my dad had a stroke. He collapsed in the backyard while watering the garden and was rushed to the hospital. My sister called me sobbing. By morning, he was in a coma, and somehow, after everything, I still found myself standing in that hospital room next to my mother, staring at the man who once joked about my daughter skipping dessert so she'd fit into her jeans. I didn't forgive them. I didn't even speak. I just sat there, because leaving didn't feel right either. Hospitals are loud in the quietest ways. The beeping machines, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, the hum of lights. I watched my father breathe through machines, not knowing if he could hear us. The doctor said the stroke was severe, but not hopeless. My mother held her purse like it was an anchor, staring at his bracelet like it might explain how we got here. I brought my daughter on the second day. She held my hand tight and whispered, "Does he still remember me?" I told her he did. I had no idea if that was true. That night she drew him a card. Stick figures holding hands, purple marker spelling out, "I still love you even if you were mean sometimes." I slipped it under his pillow when no one was looking. Days blurred together. I came before work, after work, sometimes late at night. My sister started showing up more too. She brought snacks, books, awkward silence. No one mentioned the party. No one mentioned the past. On the 5th night I came in late. The halls were dim, the air cold. When I walked into the room, someone else was there, a woman, well-dressed, soft perfume, sitting close, holding his hand, speaking quietly, not praying, talking. I said, "Excuse me." She startled, stood up fast, said she was a friend from a long time ago. I told her he hadn't worked in 10 years. She froze, nodded once, and left. The next morning, over burnt coffee in the cafeteria, I asked my mother who she was. She stared into her cup for a long time before saying, "You weren't supposed to see her." Then she told me everything. Coffee that turned into lunches. Lunches that turned into comfort. Years of something unspoken, but real enough to hurt. She said she stayed because she was afraid of ending up alone like me. I didn't answer. I just walked back to his room. That night, he moved. The next day, he opened his eyes and looked straight at me. His mouth trembled. He said my name once and started to cry. He told me he was sorry for the way they treated me, for making my mother forget I mattered too. I didn't forgive him, but something loosened. And that's when I realized this wasn't about a birthday anymore. It was about whether people could change after being forced to finally see themselves. He came home on a gray Tuesday in March, wheeled in by a nurse, while my mother held the door open with shaking hands. He looked thinner, older, like time had rushed him when he wasn't looking. Tubes were gone, machines quieter now, but the slur in his speech and the way his left hand trembled made everything feel fragile. When my daughter saw him, she didn't hesitate. She walked straight over and hugged him carefully, like she already understood that bodies can break even when hearts don't mean to. He smiled, the kind of smile that knows it hasn't earned forgiveness yet, and held her longer than expected. We didn't talk much that day. No speeches, no apologies delivered for effect, just presence. That was new for them. My mother hovered, offering water, adjusting pillows, asking questions no one needed answered. I watched her the way you watch someone learning a new language, awkward but trying. When they left, my daughter asked if we'd be coming back soon. I told her we'd see. I wasn't ready to promise anything. The gifts started a few days later. A package on our doorstep with no return address. Inside were sneakers my daughter had pointed out months earlier, purple with little wings stitched on the sides. Not expensive, just remembered. No note, no explanation. A few days after that, an envelope with $500 tucked between blank sheets of paper. I stood in the kitchen staring at it, unsure what to do with money that didn't come with strings. Then the pie arrived. Homemade cinnamon apple, still warm, wrapped in foil. A sticky note on top said, "Still learning." My daughter took a bite and said it tasted familiar, like the grandma she wished she had before. That night, I cried quietly in the bathroom, not because I trusted it yet, but because regret looks different when it's not loud. We stopped by their house a week later for a short visit. I hadn't planned to go in, but my mother opened the door before we could knock, eyes red, hands clasped like she'd been pacing. She handed my daughter a small box without saying a word. Inside was a necklace, a thin gold chain with a star-shaped pendant. I recognized it immediately. It had been mine when I was her age. I wore it every day until it disappeared one afternoon. I'd always assumed I lost it. Now I wasn't so sure. Later, while my daughter brushed her teeth, I asked my mother why she gave it back. She said she'd saved it for something and never knew what. There was something unsettling and tender about realizing she'd kept a piece of me all those years, even while pretending I didn't matter. Changes followed slowly, the way real ones do. My mother stopped commenting on my daughter's body and clothes. She listened more than she spoke. My father couldn't drive anymore, but every Friday, he video called my daughter and let her read to him. He sent handwritten postcards with crooked letters and bad jokes. She treated them like treasure. My sister surprised me most. She started correcting her boys when they said something unkind. She defended my daughter loudly, without looking at me for approval. At the piano recital that fall, the boys gave my daughter a standing ovation. She laughed so hard she nearly fell off the bench. We had dinner together weeks later. Awkward at first, careful. Halfway through, my father tapped his glass and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. He said they missed too much, said too little, and were cruel when they thought they were being honest. He asked if they could do better, starting now. My daughter nodded once, not forgiving, just allowing. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. No lectures, no portion comments. When asked what she was thankful for, my daughter stood up and said she was thankful her family found their way back to her. No one spoke after that. Because what do you say when the child you failed is the one offering grace? It didn't fix everything. Nothing ever does. But it started something real. And sometimes that's the bravest ending you get. After Thanksgiving, things didn't magically become warm and easy. They became careful. Every visit felt like stepping onto a floor that had once collapsed. My mother asked before hugging my daughter. My father watched more than he spoke, like he was afraid a wrong word would send us all running again. I stayed guarded, polite but alert, the way you are around someone who once hurt you without realizing it. What surprised me was my daughter. She was the bravest one in the room. She corrected them gently when they slipped, reminding them of rules they were still learning. "We don't talk about bodies like that," she said once, when my mother almost commented on a cousin's weight, not angry, just factual. My mother froze, nodded, and apologized, out loud, to a child. That was new. Weeks passed. Consistency replaced apologies. My mother showed up when she said she would. My father never missed a call. My sister stopped deflecting and started intervening when her boys repeated something unkind. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and real effort has a texture you can feel. It doesn't rush you. It waits. One afternoon, my daughter came home from their house, quieter than usual. I asked if something was wrong. She said no, then added, "Grandpa told me he's scared he won't get better." I sat with her on the couch and let that sit between us. Fear makes people honest in ways pride never does. That night, she drew him another picture. Not of holding hands this time, but of a tree with roots and new leaves. She taped it to the fridge herself. My mother called me later that week and asked if I'd have dinner with her alone. Just us. I almost said no. Instead, I said yes and chose a small diner where we could leave easily if we needed to. She didn't defend herself. She didn't bring up the past to justify it. She just said, "I failed you when it mattered, and I let that failure spill onto your child." Her voice shook, but she didn't cry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just don't want to keep being that person. I told her forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a process. She nodded like she already knew. Spring came, and with it, small, ordinary moments that used to feel impossible. My daughter invited her grandparents to a school open house. They came early and stayed late. My father sat through every presentation, clapping too hard. My mother brought snacks for the class and asked the teacher how my daughter was doing without interrupting once. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, heart tight, wondering how something so small could feel so heavy. The jealousy that once poisoned everything never came back. My sister admitted later that seeing her boys repeat cruelty scared her. I didn't want them growing up thinking love looks like favoritism, she said. That sentence mattered more than any apology she could have given me. We didn't move back. That was never on the table. Distance was part of what made the healing possible. Boundaries stayed firm. Visits were planned. Time together had structure. My parents accepted it without protest, which told me they finally understood that access was no longer automatic. One night, months later, my daughter asked if Nana used to be mean on purpose. I told her no, that sometimes people are hurt and pass it along because they don't know another way. She thought about it and said, "I'm glad we didn't let it keep going." Me too. The family didn't go back to what it was. It became something else, smaller, quieter, more honest. The kind of family that understands it, already lost everything once, and doesn't want to risk it again. And I learned something important in the long stretch after the crisis passed. Walking away saved us. Coming back carefully rebuilt us. Both were necessary, both were hard. But choosing my daughter first didn't destroy the family. It forced it to finally tell the truth. That birthday they told me to skip didn't just change where we lived. It changed who was allowed to matter. And once that line was drawn, nothing could cross it again.